The 2023 NBA Draft has come and gone, and while the Kings trading the 24th pick may be a bit underwhelming tonight, I'm telling you, the Kings made great moves to set themselves up for some fireworks in free agency. You are listening to Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all off-season long. Today's episode is brought to you by Birddogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA, and they'll throw in a free custom Birddogs Yeti-style tumbler with every order. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports reporter and producer for ABC 10 News. I'm here inside the Sacramento Kings practice facility, connected to the Golden One Center. You can see the offices behind me. In those offices, Monte McNair and his front office staff had their boardroom for draft night and ultimately decided, in addition to making a couple of selections in the second round, which we will get to, they decided to trade the 24th overall pick and Richaun Holmes to the Dallas Mavericks for not much in return. Now, that's where the underwhelming thing comes into play. I know that many Kings fans were hoping, especially with names like Leonard Miller and Omax Prosper, who were on the board. And technically, the Kings did draft Omax Prosper, even though we know that once this deal is finalized here in the coming hours, that Prosper will be going and playing for the Dallas Mavericks. I understand it was a bit of an underwhelming night from a Kings standpoint. I saw a lot of reaction to that trade going, so the Kings just gave the 24th pick away and Richaun Holmes for nothing. Well, on one hand, you have to understand that with the negative value on Richaun Holmes' contract, he's owed a little over $12 million this year and like $12.8 million or something like that next year. In order to get a team to take that money off of your books, you have to give them something. So the Kings gave the 24th overall pick to the Dallas Mavericks for them to take Richaun Holmes and his money. Now, I've talked to people from Dallas. I know there's been an interest in Richaun Holmes in Dallas for a while. So Dallas Mavericks fans might be feeling thrilled that in addition to Omax Prosper, they got Richaun Holmes in this deal. But they have to pay for him. The Kings no longer have to pay for him. I was convinced coming into this draft that the Kings weren't going to trade the 24th overall pick for financial reasons. Well, in reality, the Kings did trade the 24th pick for financial reasons. Here's what happens for the Sacramento Kings from this trade. They now have over $30 million in cap space. The numbers are roughly in like the $33, $34, $35 million range for cap space. That includes the cap holds, positional cap holds, minimum cap holds that are on the Kings books because they have to fill all of their roster spots. That also adds a $12 million TPE, traded player exception. What that means is the Sacramento Kings can essentially make a trade in the next year. They have to use this TPE in the next year. They can make a trade, and if they trade for a $12 million or less player, they can take that player in, absorb that player into their cap without it affecting their cap or without penalizing them in any kind of way. So the TPE is a big deal for the Sacramento Kings to use, and the Dallas Mavericks actually absorbed Richaun Holmes into a TPE that they created for themselves, trading the 10th overall pick earlier in the night. So it's a good asset for the Sacramento Kings to have, but the big thing is the cap space that the Sacramento Kings opened up. Now, there are rumors or conversations about what are they using that cap space for. They could use it to potentially re-sign Domantas Sabonis, and I know there's discussions going on about the Kings avoiding unrestricted free agency altogether and just trying to come up with a contract extension with Sabonis so they can go into next season not having to worry about that in the coming offseason. There's that, and that money could potentially help with that. There is also the possibility of the Kings going out and now making a pretty sizable swing in free agency. Now, free agency is always a slippery slope, right? And I tweeted this out. It's great that Monte McNair opened up cap space, but in order to use cap space, you have to convince players to accept that contract offer and come here to Sacramento. Could Kyle Kuzma now be a target of the Sacramento Kings? The Kings could now theoretically afford to sign Kyle Kuzma for around like a $30 million per year deal to bring him here to Sacramento. I don't know if you think he's worth that money or not, but they can now do this. They, of course, could use this money and then maybe a little bit of cheaper free agent to bring back Harrison Barnes and like a Brooke Lopez or a Josh Hart or something like that. Now, maybe they can't get both of those players, but they could sign a cheaper free agent for not $30 million per year and still have cap space left over to make some smaller, maybe role player or end of the bench type moves. They could also maybe make a play, and I know a lot of you aren't going to like this. They financially open themselves up for being involved in the Draymond Green sweepstakes. And I know there's been discussion, at least around the Sacramento Kings. I won't say internally with the Kings, but there's been discussions about Sacramento as potentially a landing place for Draymond Green, who just declined his player option on his deal. So the Kings now have more financial flexibility. I think Jason Ross might have said that second to the Houston Rockets, the Kings might have the most cap space out of any team. So that's a pretty big deal. What the Kings did with this trade, they did what contenders do, right? They turned the 24th pick, which could have been a good player, could have been a solid rotation player, but at best you're looking at drafting someone with the 24th pick who can come in and fill a role, maybe play 15, 20 minutes a night and help this team win basketball games. There is a chance, of course, at 24 that you can find a star, but that was relatively unlikely, even with some of the decent names on the board that the Sacramento Kings had at that spot. You turn the 24th overall pick into more money, more cap space to go get a proven NBA player, a player that can really make an impact opening that championship window here in Sacramento that maybe financially, initially you couldn't afford because of the money on Richaun Holmes' books. I think James Ham summed it up best on social media. The Sacramento Kings essentially sold the 24th overall pick for $25 million from the Dallas Mavericks, if you combine the 2 years left on Richaun Holmes' deal. That's a big deal, especially the second year of that contract when the Kings are going to be going into next summer where they're going to be looking to pay some players. And like I said, Monte McNair has been consistent with this throughout his entire time as the general manager of the Sacramento Kings. It opens up flexibility that the Kings didn't necessarily have. So no, they didn't get a player. Maybe that's disappointing to you, but understand that this trade is not a bad one. This trade is not the Kings just gave Richaun Holmes and the 24th pick away for nothing. If Monte McNair is making this deal, that means he has a plan in place. Now, of course, he's not going to tell us anything about it. We talked to him in a post-draft press conference, and I was planning on playing comments for you from these press conferences, or this press conference. Monte didn't say anything, and I mean anything. And normally he keeps his cards pretty close to his chest and says a lot without saying anything, but he literally gave us nothing tonight. I asked him about like what the Kings might do with the two-way contracts. I asked him about the plan changing tonight, going from maybe they had a guy or two in mind at the 24th spot to as soon as the Dallas Mavericks made that trade and had that TPE and suddenly were potentially able to bring in someone financially like Richaun Holmes, that might have completely changed the plan for the Sacramento Kings tonight. Maybe that was the Mavericks' plan going into tonight, and the Kings were already aware. Who knows? Monte gave us absolutely nothing. But there has to be a plan in place. Monte now has this money, and on the 30th of June, free agency begins. And the Kings can be serious players in free agency now with the money that they have brought in. So this is a good move for the Sacramento Kings tonight. It's definitely more cap and finances than it is player and basketball. But the true results of this trade are yet to come. They're yet to come with what the Sacramento Kings end up doing in free agency. So unfortunately, we have to be a little more patient, right? Unfortunately, we have to wait a little bit longer to see what the Sacramento Kings do with this money. But I like the flexibility that they've added, and now they're really in a big position to make a big swing, which maybe potentially they weren't able to do before tonight's trade. Now, they did also, of course, make selections in the second round. I'm going to talk about both of those selections here in just a second. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by Birddogs. If you're a fan of khakis, if you're a fan of comfortable pants or comfortable shorts, Birddogs are perfect for you. The versatility that you get, they're perfect for summertime, perfect for year-round in all reality. And I'm a big golfer, and I've shared with you before, like these Birddog pants and shorts are perfect for a round of golf, but you can do so many things. You can work in these pants. You can just wear them leisurely around the house. They look great, they fit great, and they feel great. Birddogs is highly recommended. I encourage you to go to their website and check out all of the products that they have. It's really an awesome brand in terms of all of the great stuff that you can get. Go to birddogs.com/lockedonnba for a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/lockedonnba for a free Yeti-style tumbler. You won't want to take your Birddogs off. We promise you. So the trade of the 24th overall pick wasn't the only move that the Sacramento Kings made tonight. They also swapped the 38th pick and a future second-round pick for the 34th pick, which initially was owned by Boston. That was traded to Charlotte earlier on in the evening, and then the Kings traded or acquired that pick from Charlotte. So a bit confusing how that pick became the Sacramento Kings pick, but with the 34th overall pick, and this deal has not been finalized yet, although Monte McNair was able to talk about this a little more. They acquired Colby Jones out of Xavier. Now, I'll be completely honest with you. I didn't know much about Colby Jones. If you followed along through the pre-draft process on Locked On Kings, I never really spoke about Colby Jones or didn't talk about Colby Jones too much with a couple different analysts, but from the conversations that I had with fellow Sacramento media, research that I did online, a couple of text messages and conversations with some of the draft experts that I know, the Kings seemed to get good value with this pick. He was projected to be a late first-round pick, fell to 34. The Sacramento Kings ended up moving up and grabbing him. He's 21 years old, spent 3 years in college, and the best way people have summarized Colby Jones is he's a really well-rounded player. He's solid on the defensive end, solid on the offensive end, rebounds really well for a guard, averaged 5.7 rebounds a game for Xavier in this last season. His three-point shot could get better, but showed drastic improvement from his first 2 years at Xavier to this past season that he had, up from the low 30s to 37% from three-point range. So he's someone who could potentially space the floor well. He's listed as 6'6", although it says 6'4.5" in shoes. He has a 6'8" wingspan. If you're interested in those measurements, someone that I don't think will get a two-way contract, although what the heck do I know? He's probably going to be a maybe 10th, 11th, 12th man on the roster. But I think this selection does give us an indication or an idea of the futures of some current Kings free agents. In particular, since the Kings have made this move, I think Terrence Davis is gone. I think Terrence Davis's time as a Sacramento King has come to an end. Colby Jones is primarily a two-guard, although is listed as a 2-3, so he is a wing, someone who can space the floor. Again, a really well-rounded player that, in theory, if he gets playing time, however many minutes a night, he can make an impact on both ends of the floor. Monte McNair seemed very pleased with the acquisition of Jones. Obviously, they wanted him, so they traded to go up and get him. They didn't believe that he was going to be available at their initial spot, which was 38. So clearly the Sacramento Kings feel that there's a good chance that if Colby Jones makes the main roster, which I think the expectation is that he will, that he can be somewhat of an impactful player for the Sacramento Kings. Again, I don't know much about the young man. From watching tapes, he seems athletic. He seems to work hard. I like the fact that he's an older prospect. If you've listened to the Locked On Kings podcast over the last few years that I've discussed the draft, you know how much I prefer older prospects than just 19 and 18-year-olds coming out of the draft. I understand why younger prospects are more appealing from a longevity standpoint, but for a team in the position of the Sacramento Kings where they're looking to add players to help them win right now, getting an older prospect who has a little bit more of an NBA-ready body, again, he's 21 years old, I think he can come in and provide a nice impact for the Sacramento Kings. I wasn't planning on playing Monte McNair's comments for you, but Monte did have a few things to say about Colby Jones. Take a listen.
Kobe's work ethic and, the person that he is, his character, those are the types of things that we like to see for guys as they improve throughout college, and that they'll continue to improve when they get into our situation. But it's all the other stuff that Colby does too. He's got great touch. The shot improved obviously this year, but that he can get in there and make a play with a pass an offensive rebound on the offensive end, and then defensively can guard, up and down. Probably not a lot of centers, but he's strong, he's big, and he's going to be very versatile on that end as well. But obviously the shooting is a big part of the NBA these days, and we like to see the growth that he's shown.
Also want to mention too, when it comes to NBA comps, I don't know how much you like player comps or not. Sometimes they make me roll their eyes, but other times it kind of gives us an idea of what type of player they are. These are the player comps that we found for Colby Jones tonight. We found player comps to Malcolm Brogdon, which is exciting, player comps to Josh Hart, which is really exciting, and then maybe someone that you're a little more familiar with, a player comp to Dante DiVincenzo. So it kind of brings that well-rounded guard who works hard on both ends of the floor, but can also establish a presence defensively too, which we, of course, know the Sacramento Kings are starting to establish. So if Jones could turn into any one of them at the NBA level, that's a really solid pickup for the Kings. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is also brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part that you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know that the part will fit, or you get your money back, because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop at eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. The last move that the Sacramento Kings made on the evening with the 54th pick, this was the only move the Kings made with actually their pick, so it was the easiest one for them to announce. The Kings ended up drafting Jalen Slawson with the 54th overall pick. Now, I'm not even going to pretend that I knew anything about this young man coming into the league. He's a 5-year senior, so he spent 5 years in college, and over those 5 years experienced some steady growth. He is 23 years old coming into the league. He's listed at 6'7". He did average a little over or a little under 16 points per game, shot 39% from three-point range, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, 1.5 blocks, and 1.5 steals a game last season, or in his most recent college season. So those numbers are exciting, but in reality, what we're talking about here is likely a two-way player. And again, I asked Monte McNair at the press conference, are there any plans with that two-way spot, or both of their two-way spots? Are they going to give another one to Keon Ellis? Are they going to give a two-way spot to Jalen Slawson? Or maybe Colby Jones going to be a two-way player? Monte wouldn't tell us anything. Wouldn't give us any indication of that. That's a decision that is to be announced and to be made down the road. There are a lot of things about tonight's draft that we won't know about until down the road, until free agency truly begins. So we'll have to wait and see to get the answers that we want. I know, again, underwhelming, maybe a little disappointing for draft night, but in reality, again, I think this is a really solid night, maybe kind of a ho-hum in some ways, boring night, but I also think, at least I was expecting that's how a lot of this offseason is going to go for the Sacramento Kings. Now, because of this Richaun Holmes and 24th overall pick trade that opens up cap space, now the Kings are in a better position to make fireworks, when before that, I didn't think anything massive of that scale was going to happen. So we'll see what Monte McNair does. Draft night is in the books. Certainly not as exciting as draft night last year when the Kings got Chris Murray at number 4, Keegan Murray at number 4, and Chris Murray was almost on the board for the Sacramento Kings at 24. He went 23 to the Portland Trail Blazers. Although I'll say, if he was there at 50 or at 24, I don't know this for sure, but I'm pretty confident that even if the Blazers didn't take Chris Murray at 23 and he was on the board at 24, I think the Sacramento Kings still would have made this deal for the financial reasons. Although this trade never went through until the Sacramento Kings were actually on the clock. You could speculate that the reason why they waited was because they were seeing if Chris Murray would be there to make that selection. I don't know. We're never going to get the answer to that question. So I know a lot of us wanted to see the Twins here in Sacramento. Unfortunately, we're not getting that. But the good news is he's staying in the West. The Kings and Portland Trail Blazers typically play each other 4 times a year. So we're going to see a lot of the Murray brothers on the floor together, just going against each other. So that will be a lot of fun. Covering the draft, as always, is a lot of fun. Thank you for this draft process. I appreciate all your support here of the Locked On Kings podcast during that time. Now we turn our attention to free agency and beyond. Before free agency begins, all next week, I'm going to be bringing on guests, and we're going to be discussing in more detail what the Kings did on draft night. These are just my initial reactions here from the Kings Practice Center, but I want to hear your reactions too. So send me your thoughts. You love the trade. You hate the trade. What do you want to see the Kings do with the money? What do you think of Colby Jones and Jalen Slawson? Let me know. You can reach me on Twitter at MattGeorgeSack. You can email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com, or leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. Appreciate your support. Can't wait to have you join me on the next episode of Locked On Kings. Until then, my name is Matt George. You've been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.